All right, Brad. We've been starting with some beef, and I got a big beef with you this time. Some might even call it a McBeef.
Oof.
Trey McBride, all the way down here at 100th overall in your rankings. I have him up at 44th overall. I think he's my fourth ranked tight end. I forget where that puts him exactly for you at the tight end position, but
tight end 9. Tight end 9.
Tight end 9. Tight end 9, Brad. Did you know that after Zach Ertz was injured and then eventually released, from weeks 8 to 18, Trey McBride averaged 11.7 half PPR points per game? You want to take a guess where that would have ranked over the course of the 2023 season?
Tight end 2?
A little higher. Tight end 1. Okay. Trey McBride without Zach Ertz, tight end 1 in points per game, tight end 1 in target share with a 26.7% target share, tight end 1 in yards per route run at 2.24. And that's not even the best part. Trey McBride only scored 3 touchdowns on his 81 receptions in 2023. That, you know what that means? That means a good chance of positive touchdown regression. So the ceiling is even higher than what we saw, which was tight end 1 production. So talk to me about Trey McBride. Is this just the numbers from earlier in the year when Ertz was still there, dragging his best ball rating down, or what's going on here?
I think there's a few factors to consider with Trey McBride, but I do want to affirm he absolutely crushed from week 8 to 18, and I understand the hype. And if he wasn't ranked so high by literally everyone else, maybe this is the pendulum swing type of player for me, where there's so much hype that I just need to dampen it down a little bit. So I think that's what I'm going to do, because you're right. Trey McBride, not only was he the number 1 tight end during that span, but his efficiency metrics season long were phenomenal. Number 1 among tight ends in target rate, number 5 in yards after the catch, number 5 in receptions, second best tight end on the season in terms of yards per route run, 5th in target separation. I'm making the case for you here, Jacob, but I think there's an important part for us as fantasy analysts. We always need to take things in context. And one piece that is oftentimes missing from this best ball value rating is the context. And yes, it definitely hurt Trey McBride when Zach Ertz was in there. It was frustrating for many Trey McBride managers, because I believed that Trey McBride was the better tight end when Ertz was healthy. And the PFF receiving grades were there. The yards per route run were certainly there, but the volume wasn't there for Trey McBride. But then Zach Ertz, as you mentioned, got injured, and then McBride stepped into a full role. But it wasn't just the Zach Ertz injury that led to Trey McBride being this tight end 1 overall for a period of 11 weeks. It was also that Hollywood Brown was dealing with a significant amount of injuries throughout that second half of the season. And you're like, one major target earner out, and Zach Ertz also out. That's okay, fine, Bradley. Like it was 1, but he still crushed. Yes, he did. But then you also have 3rd round rookie Michael Wilson missing time as well. So you're looking for anyone to throw the ball to of any level of competence, and Trey McBride is a high level of confidence type of guy. His athleticism is there. 89th percentile 40-yard dash, 85th percentile speed score. And we look at the game logs from week 8 on: tight end 1, tight end 2, tight end 11, 7, 3, 3, and 7 among those tight end finishes. My concern, though, is ultimately that the Arizona Cardinals are going to add not 1, but 2 significant pass catchers this offseason. There's already been some rumblings about it being Marvin Harrison Jr., who could immediately step in and command a 22 to 27% target share. The median, I guess, would be 24%. He's an immediate target earner, but I think the Cardinals are also in a position, given their cap space, to sign a big-time veteran like a T. Higgins, who is also a 22+% target share earner. They've got the cap space. They've got the draft capital. And I love Trey McBride. I love the efficiency metrics. This is not a falsehood. Like Chigakonkwo, this is not Chigakonkwo of 2022, where Okonkwo was putting up elite efficiency metrics and then completely implodes. Trey McBride will not implode in 2023. He is not a fake, but I think I want to at first steer clear of Trey McBride until we get more answers in this Arizona offense, because he was the only significant asset for many of these games that the Arizona Cardinals were going to throw to. Like Rondell Moore, we know now is nothing. He's not going to get it done. He's not an answer for the Cardinals, but we do know Kyler Murray is. And so if you want to take a shot on Trey McBride being a tight end 3, tight end 4 for this season, I'm fine with that as his tight end ranking. I wouldn't fight you on it because I think that there's a lot of nitpicking in that tier. Sure. But my concern is overall ranking. And I think that even the best tight ends, like if you look at where I even have, we start haggling over Travis Kelce. I had Travis Kelce.
You're low on tight ends.
I'm low on tight ends because like we can get almost the same type of production from those tier of tight ends, the Kittles, the Andrews. If Hawkinson was healthy, the Hawkinsons, there is, and now we can add Trey McBride to that level. I think that now Arthur Smith is gone. We can add Kyle Pitts to that level, barring like any ridiculous head coach signing, right? At least there's more of a chance now. But my point remains is that there's a much larger tier of this type of tight end now in our fantasy drafts. And I think that Trey McBride is just getting pushed too far up given how far the pendulum could swing the other way this offseason. I just want to wait until the dust settles. That's why I have Trey McBride much lower than where the consensus is, because you have him at 44 and the expert consensus rankings at Fantasy Pros have him at 70 overall. So
interesting.
I think that there is some trepidation to add a player. Like I would think that David Njoku is in that same tier. Like we saw elite spike weeks, but there's also like, how far will the pendulum swing for David Njoku if Deshaun Watson is the quarterback for next year? That's a legitimate question. So there are like an Evan Ingram, if Calvin Ridley returns. If he doesn't return, the Jags don't sign anybody, you've got a massive pendulum swing. If anything, I'm probably too low on Evan Ingram at 91 overall. But I think that comes to my philosophy of tight ends, that at any point that tier of tight end could spike. And I think I'm just low overall on that tier of tight end relative to where I would be drafting them, or where the general consensus is drafting them.
Yeah, and I guess I can see the merit to that approach to the tight end position as a whole, because I think maybe I'm a little anchored to prior years where prime Kelce, or at least the prior version of Kelce that we expected, was a first-round pick, and it was essentially this stratified approach of Kelce, one or two guys who could maybe approach Kelce, a Waller and Andrews in past years, and then really after that it's a take your pick and just punt the position. Whereas now there's multiple guys with paths to upside, and we saw it with Njoku this year. Now I think he's more likely to get that pendulum swinging in the wrong direction, just given the likelihood that the Browns' passing volume severely regresses, and some of those games that he had came without Amari Cooper, without Elijah Moore. It's not like there's a whole lot of weaponry on that Cleveland offense outside of Cooper and Njoku in the first place. There's a lot of fragility in the tight end landscape right now. Maybe I can let tight end 9 slide maybe for McBride, but I don't know if the pendulum swings in the right direction for him. I'm going to be drafting him in the 3rd round probably.
Yeah, I will have to say, Jake, that if you look at when I posted my initial rankings of tight ends, the tweet that exploded was about Trey McBride. And literally, so I revealed to the world that I ranked Trey McBride at tight end 9, and 51,000 people saw it. And I'm just going to share with you some of the comments that that came from this.
Will those receipts, Brad?
Yeah, I will. One person said, you'll end up with 0 McBride if you use this list. Let's see. You need to flip Kelsey and McBride. Let's see what else. Why is McBride down at 9? McBride feels low unless you're expecting Arizona to draft or sign a wide receiver. He's going to dominate targets, which is the primary argument there. This is a really bad first crack at this. This is phenomenal. McBride too low, 8th tight end this season, and basically didn't play until week 7. It's wacky that you don't have Kyle Pitts on this list and McBride is too low. Oh my goodness, this is phenomenal. McBride at 9 is way too low. This is the lowest I've ever seen Trey ranked in my life. Hilarious to see McBride at 9. McBride can't see anything else. Why are you so low on McBride? Like literally Mick top 5, someone commented. It was very controversial. I'll leave it at that. Y'all can check out the rest of the tweets for the comments section, but it's a lot of fun getting some of this engagement, but I don't do it for the engagement. I do it because there were reasons why I thought so. And what McBride put up was certainly tantalizing at the end of last season. No ignoring that. And the efficiency metrics are there. My concern though, is that Arizona had no one else to rely on. And McBride was the most reliable piece of that offense. Also shout out to Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray crushed when he was back coming off of the ACL. So I think that in a second year in the system with more offensive weapons, Hollywood Brown's probably going to be gone from the Cardinals. I think that Arizona overall is a team that I want to be drafting a lot of here in 2023 or 2024. But now I guess I'm not going to get much Trey McBride in the way too early drafts.
You'll get some anyways to correlate for week 17 and get those game stacks in, I'm sure. But speaking of second year in a system, let's continue working our way through the rankings here. And at 60th overall, you have Rashee Rice. This is another one that I have a lot higher. I have him ranked at 29th overall in the middle of round 3 there. Yeah, I see Rice as the ascending year 2 breakout candidate tied to Patrick Mahomes. It's very possible that he ends up even higher than this, but for concerns with his role, there are film concerns as far as the nuance and the route technique that he's put on film so far. He's been sort of this early career Deebo Samuel usage, right? Where he's doing a lot of underneath stuff. He's basically unguardable on slants and screens and in breakers close to the line of scrimmage, but he hasn't shown that alpha downfield boundary wide receiver profile yet. And so it's this unique combination of, yes, he's earned a lot of volume as a rookie, which we love, but is there room for more? Does he have the insulation if another wide receiver gets brought into Kansas City? And it seems very likely that they will look to add to that very, very desolate wide receiver room. The Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore and MVS, Justin Watson. I don't know. Pat might lose his mind if he has to play with that another year. And Travis Kelce, of course, as we know, is starting to look his age finally. To me, Rice has tons of upside, and I'm willing to chase that upside. But you have him down at 60, so tell me about it.
Yeah, we did see Rashee Rice in this playoff game against Miami really go off as, once again, the lead receiver. And my best ball value rating hasn't adjusted for week 18 or the playoffs yet. That is going to be something that I do include in the best ball value rating because these are games against NFL caliber teams where teams are trying to, if anything, playoff games should frankly matter more because these teams are trying even harder to win, and they're going to funnel the ball to their best players. And it's clear that Rashee Rice is the best receiving option for the Kansas City Chiefs. So once again, this is one of those where I love Rashee Rice, and I wish I wasn't this low on him. So the end of round 5 is where I have Rashee Rice at, and looking at his best ball value rating, he did come on a little late. It was right above, so he's wide receiver 36 in best ball value rating, right above Gabe Davis, right below Christian Watson, trailing Zay Flowers, Jacoby Myers, T. Higgins, but ahead of Terry McLaurin this year, ahead of Cortland Sutton and Brandon Cooks. But once again, you mentioned just earning some snaps. Rashee Rice, wide receiver 79 in terms of snap share this year. He was operating as, on an average, a wide receiver 3 rotating in for the majority of the season. So in the route participation, only 62% of routes run. But when he was on the field, his target rate was 27.4, 12th among wide receivers. So the efficiency metrics are there in terms of earning targets, and he was 10th among wide receivers in yards per route run. Yes, if he can and will continue to earn those targets, I think I might be a little low on Rashee Rice. However, this is again the pendulum swing argument that how far is Rashee Rice going to get steamed up, especially if he continues to deliver in the playoffs? And we'll see if the Chiefs can continue on. They face the Buffalo Bills this next week in Buffalo. But will the Bills be able to take away Rice, or is Rice going to continue to have these big games? And I think that remains to be seen. The Miami Dolphins were not a good defense. They were really banged up. And we saw even a couple weeks before when Rice went off against Cincinnati, right? Cincinnati was not a good defense either. They had pretty much given up on the season at that point. They were, battling for one playoff spot. That was an outside chance. But I would like to, I think the dust needs to settle a little bit more for Rashee Rice. As I said, I love the efficiency metrics, but the volume concerns are there. I also wonder how you mentioned the Chiefs are going to address that wide receiver 2/1. Depends on who they bring in. I don't know if Rashee Rice is going to be the alpha. I don't think maybe it's in his profile, but as a 6 foot, 200 pound, probably not, and not super speed guy, 4.51, 40-yard dash. And I think he's got a lot of really nice attributes, and certainly an athletic wide receiver. But I don't want to get carried away at this point in the offseason when the Chiefs could go out and get one of those big time free agents or trade for somebody on the cheap, or take a shot in the draft of moving up or making a significant move. We know that the Chiefs need to make a move at wide receiver. It depends on who they bring in, though, is going to be telling to us whether or not Rice could pay off around 3, but he can't get any higher is my concern. I don't know if we can get to round 2 or round 1 Rashee Rice.
I think we could.
Okay.
I think we could.
I don't know if I can get there quite yet.
Fair. And I just think the way that drafters have treated these year 2 breakout candidates, particularly, even if they're not the wide receiver 1 on their team, if they project for a reasonable target share, if they project for a good offense, which presumably, even if the Chiefs add an alpha wide receiver 1, right? Like a T. Higgins or a Mike Evans. I think that would be worst case scenario for Rashee Rice. I think he still has some insulation at around 3 price, just on the basis of the Chiefs are going to get better as an offense, and the talent level, the confidence that we have in Patrick Mahomes, I think might be a little overrated in terms of fantasy drafters were taking Patrick Mahomes at the end of the 2nd round. And I thought that price was egregious, but it does speak to the confidence that we have in his ability to put up a 5,000 yard, 40 touchdown season through the air. And if it's looking like the Chiefs offense could shape up to do that in 2024, if they bring in the right pieces, I don't see why not for Rashee Rice. And especially if they bring in a wide receiver in free agency who's more likely to be a complementary piece where Rice can fulfill that alpha target share role. Somebody like an Odell Beckham or even a Calvin Ridley or a Marquise Brown would be more of the pure boundary vertical threat type that opens things up for Rice to continue just doing what he does underneath. It would be great if we saw Rashee Rice develop into this downfield boundary wide receiver in 2024. I don't think that's going to happen, but I can see multiple avenues to him paying off this draft costs and maybe even getting steamed up higher if the Chiefs make a deep playoff run and Rashee Rice is a big part of that production wise.
Let's play a game, Jake, without looking at your rankings. So put a blindfold on. Okay. I've got 3 wide receivers, and I want you to we're going to play a game. Rashee Rice or Chris Olave?
Rashee Rice.
Rashee Rice or Michael Pittman?
I feel like I'm being tested here. It's close. I want to say Pittman for now. I'm probably going to change my mind on that once I run my projections and I end up putting in Anthony Richardson's projected completion percentage and trying to make those numbers work. But yeah, I think Pittman.
All right. One last one. Rashee Rice or Nico Collins?
Nico. I'm pretty sure that's not how I have it in my rankings right now, but I would take Nico over Rashee today.
Okay, there you go. You heard it here. Nico over Rashee Rice in the 2024 rankings summit. Okay, make sure you guys are following Jake on Twitter at 16Fabian Jacob. Follow me on Twitter at FFStalder. If you like the content and found this helpful, smash that subscribe button here on the Fantasy Football Plus network. Jake, we've got a couple other wide receivers that are either rookie or second year guys that we see a little bit differently. So who do you want to talk about next?
Sure. So let's stick in the same range with George Pickens. Played yesterday. Blame the referees for the loss in Buffalo. I think the Steelers have numerous other issues that caused them to lose. George Pickens fumbling, not being the chief one, but one of them. George Pickens, I have down at 73, and you have up at 55. Now,
yes.
I think this might be a bit of a case of my Steelers fan cynicism creeping in here, right? Where I have no idea who the Steelers starting quarterback is going to be in 2024. I don't know if they will bring back Mason Rudolph. I don't know if they will trot Kenny Pickett back out there. The local rhetoric has been that maybe we haven't seen enough from Kenny Pickett. I've seen enough from Kenny Pickett personally.
We've seen enough from Kenny Pickett, Jake. We've seen enough. He's not good.
Yeah, we're pretty sure that if we're starting Mason Rudolph over a healthy Kenny Pickett in a playoff game, that's curtains. But we don't know if they're maybe going to look to add in the draft. Now, the perennial Steelers problem is that they make these late playoff runs and end up drafting too late to get one of the elite quarterback prospects. So maybe that's a Michael Penix, maybe that's a Bo Nix, which doesn't inspire too much confidence for me personally. But it's looking bleak is the point. That's the end point we're trying to get to here is that I don't have a lot of faith in the Steelers passing game. I think that they found a lot of success on the ground to end the season with Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris. I think that they are fully willing to embrace, for better or for worse, this identity of defense and running the football with a conservative scheme, which who knows what the offensive coordinator situation is going to be for next year either, because interim offensive coordinator has been a tandem between quarterbacks coach Mike Sullivan and running backs coach Eddie Faulkner. Who knows what the future holds? It can absolutely get better. I think it can still get a heck of a lot worse, though. George Pickens for me, he's just, apart from that's all situational concern, right? And then we get into George Pickens, the player, who is pretty much exclusively a boundary wide receiver. He did display a lot more production after the catch this year, going from about 2 yards after the catch as a rookie to 6 this year. His yards per route run increased up over 2 yards per route run, according to PFF. His efficiency greatly improved. It's possible that his average depth of target will continue to fall. But I don't know. I think as long as Deontay Johnson is there, Deontay is the primary layup target guy, and George Pickens is more the earn a living the hard way, contested catches down the field type of wide receiver in this offense.
You're right about a lot of things you said about Pickens. He wins along the boundary. He is a high average depth of target type of guy. If anything, like it's going to go down because you can't go any higher. Really, his yards per reception on the season, 18.1. Like, we're talking almost Deshaun Jackson level on 106 targets. And these rankings, as most people know, are influenced by best ball value. Like, if a player spikes, how much is that spike going to pay off for us? And George Pickens, he meddled around in like the wide receiver 30s and 40s, blah, 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 got us like 7 or 8 fantasy points most weeks. But then when he hit massively. And that's why he finished this season through week 17 as wide receiver 21 in terms of best ball value rating. That was better than Kupp. It was better than Devonta Smith. It was better than Jordan Addison or Calvin Ridley. So a back end wide receiver 2 in terms of what he could give you when he explodes. And you just mentioned this season was full of turmoil. Half the season was under Matt Canada. The other half of the season, we don't even know. Like, real talk, it was a mess. And while Mason Rudolph played admirably in what he could have done for the last few games, it was a bunch of Mitch Trubisky. It was a bunch of Kenny Pickett. It was a bunch of garbage. George Pickens was delivering some pretty massive spike weeks despite the garbage quarterback play and the bad play calling and that run heavy nature. Like, all of these things, he was able to give you some big time games despite all of those things. Imagine a Russell Wilson steps in. Things couldn't be worse than Mason Rudolph. You're like, maybe Russ. Blah, blah, blah. I think that would be a significant improvement. I think there's a lot of ways in which Pittsburgh could improve this year from a quarterback play perspective. And if they know right away who that quarterback's going to be, I think the worst decision the Steelers can make is just to continue to muddle around and say, we don't know. It's going to be a quarterback competition, Rudolph and Pickett, but because Trubisky's not going to be in there. Or maybe we'll bring in a veteran, Carson Wentz or something. I think that's the worst decision that they can make. But I want to take my chances on these types of players. Remember, last year, so in 2022, George Pickens, it was his first year coming back from the ACL. This was his first year really healthy from the ACL tear. And he puts up the 17th best yards per route run among qualified wide receivers. He puts up over 1,100 receiving yards. A 22% target share is respectable, especially as he's next to a Deontay Johnson for the majority of the season, who Deontay Johnson's, as you mentioned, the layup type of wide receiver. But Pickens is the boom downfield guy. And so of course, my view is slightly influenced by the best ball value rating, but I think that's also what you need to keep in mind of, like, when Pickens hits, he's going to hit much larger than Deontay Johnson, and which is why I have him a little bit higher than I think I have him higher than Deontay here.
Yeah, you have him way higher than Deontay.
Yeah, I think I dropped Deontay pretty far. Yeah, I have Deontay at 101 overall, which maybe is a little low. Maybe it's disrespectful, but Deontay was not as good as he was in previous seasons. So we have to wonder a little bit about why Pickens was winning more often than Deontay. Nevertheless, It's really encouraging to see yards per route run where it is in his second season, 1,100 yards. We can't ignore that. And then the big plays. So I want those type of players on my team because let's say things do fall the right way. He has pathway to wide receiver 12 overall on a season.
Sure.
And so those are the types of shots that I want to take on these. You mentioned young wide receivers in situations that can really only improve. Yeah, give me some George Pickens in round 6.
Fair. Now, I will say with just Pickens' profile, I'm not sure the volume is there to sustain a top 12 wide receiver season, just based on his target profile, 106 targets this past year. It's great to see him crack the triple digits there, but just volume wise, he's not really going to, at least in my opinion, as long as Deontay is there. Deontay is that first read option, and the efficiency, like you mentioned, with over 2 yards per route run is great to see from Pickens, and I did also applaud him for that. But like you mentioned, the 18 yards per reception is doing a lot of the heavy lifting there.
Can we also just say that George Pickens is a dog? Like, he is an absolute dog.
Fair.
He is like, it's in the terms of like dog rating among wide receivers. I don't know if there's one that's higher than George Pickens. Like maybe, okay. I think it's Pickens and then Trey Palmer in the dog rating. Like of just
he
like
woke up pissed off.
He woke up pissed off. That's right, Jake. You saw.
Yeah.
When I saw that he woke up pissed off, I was like, it's going to be a big Trey Palmer day. And what does he do? 56-yard touchdown, baby. And in fact, I think it's at FF Gator did the research, and he noticed every time that Pickens tweeted, he woke up pissed off, he scores a touchdown in that game. So shout out to Trey Palmer and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for upsetting the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah. Speaking of upsetting, Jaden Reed's usage this past weekend. My goodness. I have him ranked all the way up at 46th overall, and I think that ranking is going to be coming down despite the very impressive rookie season that he put up. Looked to me like he was going to be emerging as the Green Bay Packers wide receiver 1 for next year, with Christian Watson's health issues and Romeo Doubs just being and 24.4% targets per route run, 2.06 yards per route run, both inside the top 30 at the wide receiver position, top 25 in half PPR points per game this year for Reed. Usage both in the receiving game, the running game, deep, short, intermediate. He was really doing it all, a lot of it out of the slot, and that turned out to be the Achilles heel. Some of it was positive game script against Dallas, which not many people expected that, but
I did. Dallas. Let's go. Go Pack, go. Let's go. Yeah. Come on, go Packers. Yeah. Love the G-men. Yes. Come on, baby. Anything to see Jerry Jones cry, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, an excellent call by you. But we saw Jaden Reed we didn't see Jaden Reed, I should say. Because
the goose egg.
He was pretty much being used exclusively as a slot receiver with Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs healthy, with Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft both on the field a lot in 12 personnel. So I have a bit more concern with Jaden Reed's role. It'll be interesting to see how the Packers deploy their offense next week against the 49ers in what projects, who knows, maybe Brad has another spicy prediction on store for us, but what is more likely to be a competitive game here with some potentially trailing game script for the Packers. I think I will be capitulating here on this Jaden Reed ranking, but what are your thoughts on Reed, Brad?
I didn't even have to make an argument to Jake, and he's already capitulating. This is wow. Just let this happen every time, Jake.
Yeah, just let me talk for long enough, and
I'll let you talk
my way into or out of any player.
This is excellent. No, Jaden Reed. I love Jaden Reed. Let's just get that out of the way. I think he's an excellent talent, 2nd round pick out of Michigan State. Super speed. We saw manufactured touches for him. but the majority of his damage, and once again, all of this is going to be context and why it's so important for us in the offseason it is important for us in the offseason to do projections, because what we find is that some of these projections, we can't just say this player got this percentage of the targets and this player got this percentage of the targets. Therefore, they're going to get, let's say 25 and 25. They're both going to get 50. That's not how it's going to work out. And that's what we can see from the Green Bay Packers ultimately, that Jaden Reed was playing a lot in the 75% of his snaps come out of the slot on the season. But you mentioned the 12 personnel with Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave now back. Both Musgrave and Kraft, very good tight ends. Musgrave, 2nd round draft capital, 3rd round draft capital for for Tucker Kraft. And these players deserve to be on the field, all of them, because they're all very good.
It's a good problem to have.
The Packers are actually in a really good spot on offense, because then defenses don't know who they have to defend. And that's what we saw so much in Dallas is Musgrave is wide open. Dontavion Wicks wide open, because these guys are able to make moves. They're all like, none of them are going to be wide receiver 1s overall or tight end 1s overall, but can multiple Green Bay Packers be wide receiver 2s? That's how I have it in my rankings. I have Jaden Reed and Christian Watson right next to each other. Of course, I allow the best ball like view or lens to influence this. But Christian Watson, the reason why I have him just slightly ahead of Jaden Reed is because of the massive spike weeks. Reed had a 7.5 best ball value rating this year, and Christian Watson had a 6.01 this year. And so they were pretty close, not too far off. But when it comes to percent of time being a flex play, Jaden Reed, 44% of the time, Christian Watson, 21%. So you see Reed just being more consistent, a higher floor type of player, but Watson can access the high ceilings, the wide receiver 5 on a week, the wide receiver 1 on a week. But he can absolutely zero out, whether it's by injury or by scheme, whatever. And so my concern, you mentioned the 12 personnel, I think that can continue because Tucker Kraft has earned part of a role in this offense. And the Packers drafted Musgrave and Kraft for a purpose, to use 2 tight end sets to allow this motion for whichever wide receiver is being schemed the ball to get protected along the offensive line, especially for an offensive line that has had its ups and downs on the season. So I'm fine with Jaden Reed being at like the 5-6 turn, but there have been some fancy analysts who are big time in on Jaden Reed. Jake, I think that in some circles you are even conservative in your ranking at 46. There's been a lot of love for Jaden Reed, and he's shown a lot of good things. But once again, context matters for these wide receivers and for these conversations. And I think the context isn't really going to change very much for next year, insofar as the Packers aren't going to add a wide receiver. They're going to keep Jordan Love. But the context for us to keep in mind is, what did the Packers do when everybody was healthy? And they did pull Jaden Reed off the field from time to time. So we do have a little bit of a scarier floor than maybe we thought we did a couple weeks ago.
Yep. And that's what we have to do, right? As at least I regard myself as a somewhat decent fantasy player, is you get new information, you adjust. And so we got a little bit of new information. I'll be watching intently this coming week to see how they deploy at full strength again versus San Francisco. Speaking of changing contexts, let's switch to some running backs here, and specifically some running backs that could have some very different context in 2024, specifically the Tennessee Titans backfield with Derrick Henry and Tyjae Spears. Now, I have Tyjae Spears hold on to your seat here, Brad. I have him at 57th overall, and you have Tajay at 120th overall. Is this a Derrick Henry sticks around in Tennessee? Is this a Tennessee drafts somebody in this running back class? I'm at this point, I'm not even sure who would be a serious early day 2 threat, maybe. But I'm also much higher than you on Derrick Henry. I have him 50th overall, and you have him 81st overall. So I guess I'm just much higher on both of these guys. And for me, I see Derrick Henry leaving somewhere, going to chase a ring on a good offense, potentially. I don't know why Miami is springing to mind. I think they could use a big thumper, especially with Mostert showing those durability concerns, Achane also showing some durability concerns. I think that maybe Sean Payton could put him to good use as a replacement for a Samaje Perine in that offense. I think there's a lot of interesting landing spots for Derrick Henry, particularly with this weak running back draft class. And Tyjae Spears flashed at times this past season, both in the receiving game and in the run game. I think he's an exciting talent. Little bit of concern dynasty-wise with his knees and apparently not having both ACLs. I think he's missing
either ACL.
Either ACL. No ACLs whatsoever. So maybe a dynasty concern there. But for 2024, man, I think it's wheels up for Tyjae Spears.
I'm probably too low on Tyjae Spears. But my concerns with Tyjae Spears are that he's not built to handle the load long term. His player profiler comp, we're not going to like this. His player profiler comp is Myles Gaskin. And Gaskin,
hey, Myles Gaskin put up an RB1 season though.
He most certainly did. For one season, he was RB10 in 10 games. So let's put some context to this. Gaskin played 10 games in 2020. He was 4.1 yards per carry. He had 41 receptions and 5 touchdowns, which in small spurts could be extremely effective. And that's what I think Tyjae Spears can fit in terms of what can he offer to us. Small spurts of very high level production. This is a player that finished 6th among running backs in yards per touch, 26th in true yards per carry, so a running back 2-ish level, 7th among running backs in target share. I look at Tyjae Spears and I say, you know what? This is a guy who can be, I don't think he's going to be Austin Eckler, but he can be a high target earner if he can fall into the end zone and get some goal line carries. We could be talking about a top 12 running back. But I think what's more likely is that the Tennessee Titans bring in or draft a running back that complements Spears. Like, I don't think it's going to be necessarily Austin Eckler level, but you knew that the Chargers were always trying to look for that between the tackles grinder guy who can take the bigger hits. Spears can't afford to take the hits. He's 5'10", 200. And you mentioned no ACLs. Our concern for him for dynasty is certainly there. An amazing burst score, 91st percentile. I don't know if you saw at the Senior Bowl, but he had one of the nastiest jukes I've ever seen. And Spears can do all of those things, but I don't think as a long-term answer, he can hold up for 17 games and get 15 carries a game and also some target share. I wonder, and as I said, I'm probably a little too low on Spears, but again, I think the market is going to be so hot for Spears that it's going to be a disappointment, most likely, because a lot of fantasy analysts are projecting that he's going to fit into this high level of efficiency and he's going to get the high volume touches. And I don't know if that's going to be the case, like Tyjae Spears or Joe Mixon for next year. Like
Joe Mixon for me.
Yeah, I think it's Joe Mixon, right? Because wherever he's going to land, someone's going to bring him on. And be a between the tackles grinder, but he's also been able to catch the ball out of the backfield, and he's trusted around the goal line. So I think that those higher potential rushes are there for a Joe Mixon type. And I could see Spears, just his value plummeting. I don't think that we're necessarily going to see him this low. I think I do need to move him up. Probably Tazi Spears or Aaron Jones.
Tajay Spears.
Interesting. I think I'd still have Aaron Jones. So I don't know if I can get into like the top 80 for Tazi Spears at this point, but I maybe I am too low. But Derrick Henry, I've also been low on, more so because of his efficiency metrics. 41st among running backs in yards created per touch, 41st in true yards per carry, 38th in yards per touch. His juke rate was 24th among running backs. And look, he can have his breakaway runs. That's fine. But he disappeared in some games. He almost never disappeared in previous seasons. He was always going to give you some very good volume. And I think that speaks to his vulnerability as a fantasy asset. And Derrick Henry, now 30 years old, 5 screws in his foot. He did miss half of a season a year and a half ago. So a player that has some red flags from an efficiency perspective, probably changing teams. And the worst case scenario for Derrick Henry is Dalvin Cook 2023, where we saw Cook have a solid efficiency or a low efficiency metric season on a high volume, and then he moves teams in the next season. I'm getting dive bombed by spiders. They disagree with this take. And he moves teams and is eventually faded out because he's not giving the juice that the team was hoping for. I think that Derrick Henry, I'm worried that he will be Dalvin Cook 2023.
Sure. And those age concerns are always present for older running backs, right? Where once you start getting into the 28, 29, 30 range, the cliff comes fast.
Of course, I was like 2 years ago, I was like, I'm out on Derrick Henry completely, blah, blah, blah. And then he still in 2022 puts up a running back 4. Mm-hmm. And then in 2023, running back 16, though. And we hadn't seen a running back finish like that since back when he first took over as the RB1 for Tennessee as running back 20 in 2018. So it's been a minute since we've seen Derrick Henry fall off this far. And if he's switching teams, that is a very volatile asset with some red flags. So that's why I'm trying to fade Derrick Henry this year.
Sure. And if we keep saying this is the year Derrick Henry falls off, eventually we'll be
it's got to be eventually, right?
Okay. Let's play a game real quick with Derrick Henry landing spots.
Okay.
You tell me if this would move you up or down on Derrick Henry. New England.
I probably stay where I'm at.
Stay where you're at. Okay.
Yeah. Because I assume Zeke would go. I assume Zeke would leave.
Yeah. Yeah. That would probably be a Henry Ramondre. Okay. Josh Jacobs leaves the Raiders and Antonio Pierce replaces him with Derrick Henry.
Oh, that moves him up.
That moves him up.
I think so.
Okay. Baltimore Ravens. Paired with Lamar.
Yeah, I think in redraft that would move him up.
Okay.
This is one of those rare cases where I think in redraft he's more valuable on that type of team.
Yeah. Yeah, especially because Derrick Henry, not known for his pass catching anyways, so it's not a huge ding that Lamar doesn't throw to running backs. Okay, one last one, though. Houston Texans. Devin Singletary is a free agent. Derrick Henry steps in. Budding offense. Been run heavy this past year.
Yeah, give me... I think I moved Derrick Henry up.
Okay. So I ask because I think there are a lot of good landing spots out there. I came off the wall with the Miami Dolphins ones, but as I sit and think about it, I think there are a lot more where we get a Derrick Henry potential revival season, or at the very worst, we get like a Tony Pollard 2023 season, right? Where obviously not the same archetype, but we'll still get all of the volume, we'll get all of the high value touches. It would be extremely disappointing as a second round pick, but in that running back dead zone range, that 5th, 6th round ish, I think Derrick Henry could be a very attractive pick heading into 2024.
Okay, fine. If we're going to play a game, let's play the game. Derrick Henry or Joe Mixon?
It's Mixon for me by a hair. Just because Joe Burrow healthy, that offense fantasy points go Burr, and Zach Taylor loves to just pound Joe Mixon into the offensive line until he gets in on 4th and goal.
Derrick Henry or David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions?
I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to eat away more of the role in that backfield. Give me Henry over Montgomery.
Okay, last one. Derrick Henry or James Conner?
That one's Henry. I love me some James Conner, but that one's Henry for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. How about some rookie talk?
Okay.
We've got a whole bunch of rookie wide receivers here in your top 100.
Yes.
And some of them I think we'll definitely update as the draft process gets going and we get more accurate mock draft data. But let's just talk wide view philosophically.
Sure.
Why, if we're the viewers, you explain why we should be aggressively targeting these rookies, especially this time of year in drafts.
Yeah, I think draft capital is going to be key for us, which is why monitoring these mock drafts, especially as we get closer to April, we want to be taking guys who are projected 1st or 2nd round wide receivers. And there's, based on the very early, we're talking mid-January right now, mock drafts, there's going to be plenty of these type of wide receivers that end up landing in what could be very juicy spots, and especially some that are drafted in the back half of the 1st round, which could be better landing spots. We assume that it's going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. near the top. We mentioned earlier, possibly Arizona. Malik Neighbors has been tied to the LA Chargers, among other places, but any of these wide receivers, the Keon Coleman's of the world, the Xavier Worthies, Jalen Polks of the world, sometimes you don't know where they're going to be landing, and you want to be based on the talent or the draft capital. So the location is something to keep in mind. Like, obviously, it didn't take a lot for Jaden Reed to elevate. He had Christian Watson injury, and we knew Romeo Doubs was not going to step in and be an alpha, despite all the mentions in my Twitter timeline this offseason. I remember a tweet I sent out, and I'm like, Romeo Doubs doesn't have the upside that you think he does. And the amount of people in the mentions saying, Romeo Doubs, blah, 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 he's going to be so amazing. And I'm like, no, he was, when he was healthy, he was arguably the worst wide receiver in the NFL his rookie year. He has certainly taken a step forward, but there was a nice little pathway for a player like Jaden Reed, who got 2nd round draft capital, or a Jordan Addison, who we saw Justin Jefferson miss half of the season. And Addison talented himself, a little raw based on, if you look at his route running, and he seemed to just be winning some deep balls, but also the injuries to Kirk Cousins limited him in the second half of the season. But there was pathway for Jordan Addison to absolutely spike, and we did see a 7.6 best ball value rating from Addison, which put him in the top 36. Same thing with Zay Flowers, and I am a little lower this year on Zay Flowers, but a 6.1 best ball value rating in some weeks. We saw him be the number 1 target earner, especially with Mark Andrews out. And Jake, you should see my mentions where I had Andrews, I think tight end 2 or tight end 3, and the people were hating on it. They're like, how can you have a piece of glass as your tight end 3? And so if the general public is believing these things about injured players or players who have history of injuries, like we knew Christian Watson coming into 2023 had hamstring injuries previously.
Right.
If you find yourself in these situations where injuries had previously happened, and there's a very nice pathway, let's even take a step back from wide receivers even further. Keaton Mitchell, we were waiting for J.K. Dobbins out for the season. There's some muddling with Justice Hill, muddling with a few other running backs in that backfield, but it was Keaton Mitchell season until he himself got injured. So there is a quick churning over, and especially as we're drafting very early, these guys are probably going to go undrafted if you're not doing your research in the way too early best ball leagues that do have rookies drafted or rookies in them. And the deadline to declare, I think it was this past, was yesterday. It was the deadline to declare. So we've got now for certain which rookies are going to be in these drafts. And if they're mock drafts or getting them in the first and second round, you have an advantage to drafting even just 1 or 2 more rookies who are projecting to get first or second round draft capital over the field, because that's your leverage. You not only have a player who could be good based on the draft capital that's projected, but also you have a leverage on the field for he's not being drafted in every draft. And so you've got some leverage with drafting a lot and just rotating through. You don't have to take 17 rookie wide receivers to round out your draft. But if you've got your rotation, even without scouting, like I haven't done my full rookie wide receiver scouting yet, it's fine.
Sure.
Allow the mock drafts to do some of that scouting for you initially until we get more information, until we get the Senior Bowl and the Combine, and then we get draft capital. And then all of that information can accumulate and change your opinion a little bit, and we'll find out. And then, of course, we get the NFL draft where location can be very key. But sometimes location is not going to matter. Like Quentin Johnston, he was bad this year. He was very bad this year and was not able
to possible landing spot.
It was a great landing spot, and he got good draft capital. So this is not a foolproof strategy, but it is one that can give you, if you hit on just a couple of these guys, like if you drafted Jaden Reed, who was getting second or third round mock draft capital in the early draft rooms, that would be key. Or the situation where landing spot was not great, like Jackson Smith and Jigba, right? Smith and Jigba only a 1.12 best ball value rating. Compare that to Addison at 7 and Zay at 6, or like Rashee Rice had a 5.9 best ball value rating this year. But remember, we talked about him earlier where he only played 60% of snaps on the season. So there's certainly a pathway for many of these second, third, first round draft capital wide receivers to give you leverage in these early drafts, in these early rankings, which is why I do have many of these rookies ranked much higher, because I want you drafting them. I want you to be familiar with these players that are getting mocked in the first, second, or third rounds of at the NFL draft. And you don't have to take all of them. Just rotate through a couple of them. And as you do more of your scouting and as you do more of your research, you're diving deeper into your film grades and your process. And as we get more information, but getting some shares of these players where the field is not can give you a significant step forward over your league mates.
Absolutely said. And just adding on to that is that so often I think we get anchored to our initial scouting assessments, particularly with guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba, where we finally did get that landing spot and it wasn't great. They're like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett were very well-established NFL wide receivers. And I know that some people might point to Jamar Chase landing with Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins.
It's not the same.
It's not the same. It's not the same. JSN wasn't the same as a Jamar Chase. Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are better wide receivers relatively than T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. It's important to take all of these things into consideration and get these initial assessments. Just don't become too attached to them. A lot can change between now and September, but be open to the uncertainty of the evaluation process. Be open to your Jaden Reeds and your Josh Downses and your Michael Wilsons, who may not be on everyone's radar, who may be going undrafted in a lot of these, in your big board drafts coming up as Underdog starts to release these contests. Yeah, definitely. I think I need to add more of the rookie wide receivers to my top 100, and probably as I expand to a top 150, I'll be adding some of these guys in.
And that's why you should go to fantasyfootballplusnetwork.com. I have my draft rankings up on the website. Jake has his up as well. We're going to get some formatting moving forward, and then there's going to be some other rankings as well. So as you are listening, as you are viewing, as you're going through and saying, hey, what players should I be targeting? Or even just to accumulate a list. Like maybe you don't have the time to sift through all of these mock drafts, but you want to know who are some of these rookies that I need to keep my eye on, or maybe just rotate through in my end of draft cycle, that we have those here for you. So go to fantasyfootballplusnetwork.com, and then we're going to be adding a lot of things on that website over the course of time. Jake is, I am, other contributors as well are going to be adding pieces of content to that website. So make sure you guys are checking it out, fantasyfootballplusnetwork.com. Any last words, Jake, before we call it for the night?
No, just we'll be getting those rankings formatted, and check out the site. I'll be starting my projections process here shortly. We'll see how that generates some movement in the rankings. I'm a very projections-based guy, so sometimes that's a little limiting, but more often than not, I find it very insightful just to put some numbers to the names and have that as a touchstone for my rankings. Keep an eye out, and we'll have those up soon for you guys.
All right. Till next time, on behalf of Jake, I'm Bradley. Make sure you're following Jake on Twitter at 16 Fabian Jacob. I'm Bradley. Follow me on Twitter at Stalder. Till next time, good luck in the fantasy football streets, everybody.